Next up on the pool equipment pad, it will be the second item on the pool pad, is your filter. After the pump pulls the water from the pool body, it will push it first to the pool filter. This device is mainly to filter out all of the particulates in the pool that are, I forget what the micron size, but it's very small. And this filter, after it cleans the water out and gets all the particles out of the water, will then move the water to your heater. But what we want to do is show you this device. It has a pressure gauge setting on the top that helps you to know when the pool needs to be cleaned. It has a couple of different settings on it. And it allows you to, when you first start up, after you've cleaned it, you'll put your start feature on that particular reading. And then as particles get trapped inside of the filter, it starts to build more and more pressure. And as it builds more pressure, it will rise up until it tells you when it's time to clean your filter. But what we want to do today is go through the steps that you need to do to take this filter apart and clean it. This is usually done about every 2 weeks. If it's on really heavy use, some people get by if they don't have a lot of use on the pool, or if they have an automatic pool cover that helps to keep debris out of it, they can just clean their filter once a month. But if your pool is uncovered and getting a lot of use, you're probably going to be looking at every 2 weeks, needing to take this thing apart and clean it. If there's any one particular part of the system that's difficult to maintain, it will be this. Taking this pump or taking this filter apart is not easy. First step in cleaning this, and we'll just kind of go through it so you'll see some of the steps. First thing you need to do always is turn the pump off. Stop the water flowing through the system. Now that everything's shut down, there is a nut with a band that goes around that basically holds this filter together. You'll need to remove this nut. I've brought an impact wrench with a 22 millimeter socket. Makes work just a little bit quicker. You can also do this with a ratchet and a socket set. And I will explain to you how to put these washers back on and the different features and what order they go in. This, you can see, taking it off is not that big of a problem, but putting it back together is a little bit of a hand pull. After you've done this, there is a fitting at the bottom that allows you to drain the water out of the filter so that you can actually clean it. If you were to pull this filter off, the top off of this right now, don't know that you could, but if you did, there's water trapped inside of this. Make a big mess. So best thing to do is to release the valve at the bottom, drain the water out of it, and then you can get to the filter inside. Now that we have the band removed from the filter, we come down to the bottom. Do not release this valve up here first. It will basically trap the water in the filter until you get this nut removed. If you were to open it before you remove that, when you removed it, all the water would just gush out of the bottom and it would soak your shoes. That's experience. And then once you've got that going, it will quickly release all of the water in the system. Takes about 45 seconds to a minute for everything to drain out of the system. Now that you've taken the pressure off of this filter, now you can come in and you just rock it back and forth a little bit. And it will allow you to get to, on this particular model, has 4 cartridge filters inside. Each filter, depending on the size of the filter, some have 2, We have one particular model that has one larger filter in it, but most of them will have 4 filters inside. Way to clean this is to remove the spring. And then we rock these back and forth, and it will release each of the individual cartridges. Once you have this off, you have another little strainer on the top, easy to just rinse out. But then what we do is we take each one of the individual cartridges, and we will take them over to a hose, take a garden hose, and rinse each of the filters out. Okay, now that you've gotten the cartridge filters out of the actual filter casing, what you'll do is you'll bring them around and use the garden hose to clean the filters. What we use, and we found works really well, is this little device, and you'll find it in your gift basket from Sanctuary Pools. And what it does is it concentrates the flow of water to where it makes it easier to get the debris out. Usually it's best to start at the top of the filter and work your way down to the base, and you'll see all of the debris that it's been catching over the last couple of months. This is the winter, and we don't do maintenance as often in the winter as we do in the summertime when we're actually using the pool. But you can see it still is pretty dirty. All right. And now we will take these back around now that they've been cleaned out, and we will reinstall them. And I'll show you that process. Now that we've got the filters washed out, the cartridges washed out, we're going to reverse the process. We'll go ahead and put the little pre-filter screen back in the top. At this piece, which holds all of your cartridges in place, a little easier to go back in. This spring goes on top. First thing I want to do is make sure that this O-ring around here, you see it's kind of jumped out of place when we took the top off. We'll get it where it's seated back in the groove, so that way we'll have good contact. All right, now we can put the top on. Always a good idea when you put it down is get your, this is the closed position of your pressure gauge. So it's good to rotate it around, so that way in a glance when you walk up to your pool pad, you'll be able to see what your pressure is. Now you can just kind of snug the top down on, and then the fun part. This is where you'll actually put the band back around. It's really a two-person job. After you do it a few times, you'll get to where you learn a few tricks to hold it together. First, start with the small washer, then the spring, and then there's another washer. It's actually a larger diameter washer, and then the retaining nut, which holds it all in place. And what you'll want to do as you tighten this band back down, the guide is as you start to put so much pressure on it that you see these springs start to compress together, and when they're right at being pressed together, you know that you've taken the nut, you've tightened it down as much as you need to. And now we'll be ready to go ahead and tighten this nut down. What we've done is we've tightened it down, and the last remaining step will be to install the plug in the bottom of the filter. And this is just a process where you screw it down to where it's hand tight. It does have an O-ring in it, so you don't have to like crank it down really, really hard. Most of your pool equipment around here, most of the fittings have O-rings on them. So we do it hand tight, and it's maybe just snug it up just a little bit, but really avoid over tightening. Now that you've gotten all of the parts back together, you've got the plug in the bottom, you've tightened down the compression spring. Now that you've installed the plug and you're getting ready to start the system up, what I always like to do is I like to turn this 1/4 turn to the open position. And what this does, as the pool pump primes and it pushes all of the air out of the system that we've created by taking the system apart, it'll force it out this little opening in the top. What that does is it allows your system not to be stressed by the air rushing through the system and maybe blowing one of your fittings apart. So now what we're ready to do is to walk over and start the pool pump. You'll select one of your 2 speeds. You'll press it first, and then you'll press the start-stop button. And what your pump will do first is it will go into the prime mode. As the pump starts up, you'll start to hear all of the air rushing out of the system over here. You'll want to leave this open until you start to get water out of the top of the filter. And as soon as you get water, you turn that down. And now what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll set our clean gauge. What this is, it's a device on top of the actual pressure gauge that gives you 2 settings. It gives you a starting from right after you've cleaned it, and what we do is we look at where the needle is, and you can adjust this dial. So we turn it down to where the arrow matches the needle. Now, over the next couple of weeks, you're using the system and it's filtering water. You get more debris in the cartridge filter again. And as more debris gets in the filter, what it will do is it'll cause pressure in the system to rise. And you'll see this needle start to get up close to the marking on the gauge that says it's time to clean the filter. It's kind of another way, instead of, sometimes you can lose track of how many days it's been since you've cleaned their filter. This is a good way to check.